Episode of the Pu'u Muay Thai Podcast is brought to you by pmtlifestyle.com. Authentic Muay Thai lifestyle by Pu'u. Definitely go check out the website at pmtlifestyle.com for some awesome lifestyle merchandise. That's for those of you out there either involved in Muay Thai, looking at getting involved in Muay Thai, and embrace a healthier lifestyle to live the life of the Nok Muay. Go check it out. All right, so I'm here with Dave George. Dave, thanks for coming in today, man.
My pleasure. It's great to be here.
So, I work with you as a referee.
That's right.
That's what we've talked about a couple of times, and we're talking about brain health because it goes a little bit into what you do. People that might see you, they see you just as like Muay Thai referee. I think the first time I saw you like working away on the laptop at one of the tournaments, I'm like, what are you working on? And you're talking about some like medical devices, and I was like, oh shit, there's more than just meets the eye. And I think that's with a lot of people who are in combat sports and safety and regulation stuff too.
Yeah, I don't know how long it took you as a Muay Thai ref, but we weren't going to be making a ton of money doing that.
yeah, definitely not. If there's, my friend David Hugh, he's in LA. He's all, I can give you a surefire way to make $1 million in Muay Thai. He's all, take $2 million, start a promotion, you'll have $1 million. Just you're just gonna lose half of it. And I was like, oh yeah, it's spot on.
Yeah, I don't think any of us do this for the money.
No, it's definitely for like the love of the sport and stuff. But how did you get involved in Muay Thai?
Oh, actually, I got involved in Muay Thai through Bob Carmel. Actually, so I used to train at a place called the Lion's Den. So I have a martial
from that era.
Yeah. When the guys that are at Golden Era right now were just kids, little babies.
Yeah, Nick and Damien were
right,
like 14 or something like that going into there.
Yeah, way back in the day, and Bob was training guys out of there. Was kind of running the Muay Thai thing, I did some training over there, and just got kind of pulled into the Muay Thai world through Bob.
Yeah, and then next thing you know, were you doing like officiating or anything like that before you got involved in that?
No, not really. Well, I was kind of getting into it about 15 years ago. My background's through judo, actually. So. Oh,
okay, similar to Scott.
Yeah.
That's great. Did you actually know each other through judo by any chance, or no?
No. I've been doing judo since I was a kid. So that was my kind of martial arts background, and the reason I was at the Lion's Den was mainly for jiu-jitsu.
Okay, makes sense. Yeah,
overlap into that, and then obviously I knew about Muay Thai.
Yeah,
I just never really had the opportunity to train or been exposed to it. Of course, when you see it, it's just really impressive. And got to know Bob, and thank goodness Bob gave me a shot and kind of pulled me in. Then I guess it was just good timing. He needed help at that time with officiating, and I wanted to do it, and it was just great.
Yeah,
it's really been one of the greatest. Just a blessing, man. As I said, we don't do it for the money; we do it for the love, and it's fantastic.
Yeah, well, you've been doing it for a long time. I think you refed one of my fights like at Celebrity Theater a long time ago. Yeah. So
who were you fighting back then?
It was Nick. Yeah, it's funny. I was actually he's gonna be coming up on the podcast here too. But because now I'm training over at Golden Era when I'm here in town and everything also. So it's funny like to see like this whole like world come together, and that's how I ended up being linked up with Bob and stuff too.
I mean, Arizona's unbelievable for Muay Thai. I think a lot of people don't realize that. There's all these gyms, and one of the things that I've really enjoyed as an official in the ring is, I don't know if you've had this experience too, you're a sort of trainer.
Yeah.
But I really enjoy the different trainers and the different kind of vibe that they bring. They're all kind of specialists in a certain area. You can almost pick out their fighters when you see a fighter. You can go, that's that gym.
Oh, 100%.
And there's a number of them that are really great in town here. You could see the influence of these coaches, and particularly being exposed to these guys for this long, you can kind of get their style, and and I'll tell you what a lot of people might not appreciate when they watch a sport is just the cool level of the coaching and the coaching approaches. And there's so many great coaches here. I mean, Danny Brandt, Bob Carmel, Tiago, Mesoredo, those Seton Gym, and if people are watching this, I'm going to forget.
Yeah, there's a lot of them. You have like Paul McGowan who's out here. You have Vin who's been on the podcast before. Yeah, and then you have Mike Martinez. It's like it just keeps going, and there's more and more people that move here to the area. Yeah, it's like I'm a transplant here. It's like you're getting more and more people because of the industry and the activity too.
Yeah, it's deep with Muay Thai, and it's not just like fighting culture. It's specifically Muay Thai.
Yeah.
And you just feel this very authentic kind of Muay Thai scene here, which is just fantastic. It's a privilege to be part of it.
Yeah, which is interesting that it's not in Vegas like that.
Right.
Yeah, there's only a couple of, like, I've talked to a couple other people who run Muay Thai academies and programs, and they're like, they're eyeballing Vegas now because of for anybody's listening, there's opportunity there, right? There really is. I think outside of, did you ever go to like Nick One Kicks shows out in Vegas? No. So he has shows that are out in Vegas. It was USMTA, and he's doing them again too. And that's when I first met Bob. Was that when I was fighting on one of his shows? Yeah. So. But outside of that, there was Lion Fight went there. Push Kick Promotions was there. Lion Fight not around anymore. Push Kick Promotions not around anymore. Nick doing the amateur shows. He's still he just started back up. I think late last year, and after having a long time off. But Arizona's been constantly going since then.
Well, you know what I really think it is that it's kind of what you and I spoke about. Is that not anybody's doing it for the money.
No,
it's completely driven by the passion, and the guys that are involved here are so passionate about it that it's completely durable because it's independent on whether anyone's making any money.
Yeah,
independent of the economy. It just keeps going, and they build the next generation of really passionate fighters that are really into Muay Thai specifically, and that's what drives it, man. Guys like Bob and Tiago and Danny and these guys are just completely committed to the sport.
100%. And I've talked a lot, I have background marketing, and it's like where's the market for that? At some point, I think that we're starting to see some of it come together, but that's not the main reason we brought you in today. Yeah. One of the things we were talking about, and you probably see it through development of fighters and stuff like that too. We were talking about brain health, right? And like CTE, traumatic brain injuries, concussion. That's the sport we're in. We're in the herding business, right? And for us, working as ring officials, we're literally seeing it happen, literally inches from your face sometimes. Right. So tell me a little bit your background when it comes into the medical field.
Well, so I've got a varied background on the business side and on the clinical side. So on the business side, I'm currently chief scientific officer of a company I co-founded way back. It's a medical device company called Nocera. We're currently marketing.
Nocera.
Yeah. We are marketing a non-invasive migraine device, which we got granted last year, the FDA's breakthrough designation on breakthrough medical device for migraine. It's operated by your mobile phone. It's a pretty cool device, non-invasive. On the academic side, I've been a lecturer for a long time. I'm doing postgraduate education in neuro rehab, in brain rehab, and clinical neuroscience. And then on the clinical side, I currently have a integrative psychiatry and neurologic health practice in Scottsdale.
Okay.
So we basically, what that's focused on is where I kind of came from in the neuro rehab background. We were dealing a lot with concussion and looking at concussion when people get these head injuries. And what I was noticing was that a huge percentage of these people end up with depression and anxiety and personality changes that almost go unnoticed. Like people are like, oh, he got his bell rung. He's not quite there, but they're not really focusing on, the anxiety and the depression. And when I started looking at that, when we started looking at the imaging studies, I started noticing that the areas of the brain that are affected are the ones that are associated with your memory and your personality and your autobiographical sense of who you are and your sense of just well-being. And there's not a lot to help that. So what I looked at doing was starting to study, go back to training in psychiatry and starting to understand where these two worlds intersect to look for opportunities to apply neuro rehab approaches to psychiatry. So that's looking at rehabilitating the brain rather than, say, for example, just doing therapy or medication. We're looking at kind of an integrated thing to ramp up brain function, and it's very, very valid. Actually, when I'm refereeing, I think you I might have had these. When we're kind of doing that standing 8 and we're kind of looking at that standing 8, the thing that's coming to my mind, I'm doing that scanning, I'm like looking at eyes, okay, do they have fixation? Do they have control of their posture? I kind of think about it in that way.
How are they standing? How are their pupils and stuff like that too? Like I've seen it happen where someone got knocked down and one pupil was bigger than the other. And it's like, that's not a good sign, man.
Yeah, exactly. Well, actually, that's relevant. Yeah.
Yeah, it's a part of the neurological symptoms of concussion, right?
Yeah, definitely. So the statistics are about between 30 and 50% that we're aware of right now of people that get a concussion or head injury will have depression and anxiety as a consequence of that. Now, that's not to mention these vague personality changes. I mean, and you as a trainer, you're probably running through in your head right now, I remember that dude and I remember that dude. And you where these guys just weren't the same after a knockout or even not a knockout, just the cumulative buildup. I think in the fight game, anyone can name people like that. And there hasn't been a lot for them, for that kind of treatment. But that's a conservative estimate is about 30 or 50% are going to have personality changes. And where it's really debilitating is where the personality change is subtle, but the person that's suffering from it doesn't have the self-awareness to even
know what's happening,
and even know that their personalities change. They start having a breakdown in their relationships. They start like not getting on well with people. Things just start kind of falling apart around them. And it's not like, oh, well, I relate that back to the head injury. This is probably a head injury. It's kind of like maybe a personal thing. And then of course there's the cycle of, failure and whatever from that. So,
yeah, it kind of just spirals down, like the self-awareness thing. I think what you said is like a lot of people are like, man, all these people just fall off. And it's like, maybe it was you.
Right.
Yeah. So that's like one of those things that I think a lot of fighters may not see. And we've talked about this a little bit. And I'm pretty upfront on here about mental health stuff and everything too. I struggle with depression, and like I've looked at this kind of stuff before too. And that's just kind of the conversations we had a little bit going into for fighting, right? Because it's very big in football. There was a whole documentary. It was on Netflix, and that brought a big light onto it. And we're seeing more preventative measures that come into youth sports. Now you're seeing in Muay Thai if the kids are doing the no head contact stuff, which I'm a huge fan of. Right. But when it comes into like that cumulative brain injury or like trauma, so we have never really tracked it from when a kid first starts getting involved in contact sports, right? Do you know of anybody doing any kind of long-term research, say like that?
And you bring up a good point. Like, we see it in football. It's like head injury is not distinct in football from fighting. It's just that there's more money in football.
So it brings a bigger spotlight on it.
Exactly. So a lot of people want to get involved, and we want to track football players, and there's kind of perhaps maybe a little bit more of a prestigious kind of pull to that for the providers. So there's that pull. But a head injury is a head injury. I know, to answer your question, no, I'm not aware of it being in combat sports. Another question that people ask me is, well, would I advise kids not to do combat sports? And the answer is absolutely no. I wouldn't. And that seems, I see the injuries and I see the changes, but I still wouldn't. I still wouldn't advise them not to. But.
Well, the benefits, I think, of training, even outside of like competition too, because I don't know if I was talking to you about this or not, but there is some long-term research studies coming out in the development of child's brains doing like martial arts that involve punching, kicking, auditory cues, and visual cues, going over this center line between between the left hemisphere and right hemisphere of the brain. And they were saying that it actually develops strengthening of the myelin sheath. So they were saying that I guess they have more white brain matter over the span of their life, and they're saying just 3 months kids. Have you seen any of this stuff before when it comes into development of like the childhood brain when it comes into these activities?
So again, so there's two themes. There's the themes of, and this is exactly the theme where it came from, is the personality components, personality development, and then neural substrate development. So exactly what's happening in the brain. So there is no doubt that when a task is novel and it's persistent and it's focused, no matter what that task is, and it's intense, what's going to happen is you will have plastic changes in the brain. And then, of course, we can go on for ages about the personality changes, the confidence and all those things. So I have not seen specifically the studies that talk about white matter, but I think there was a study that just came out on personal development around jiu-jitsu 2 or 3 times a week. I think it was the one that just came out.
Yeah, I have some stuff, and it's from a woman. Her name is Carrie Bailiff. She's in Florida. Okay. So she's a child development specialist. Okay. So I was at, it's called the COVARS. They have the Professional Martial Arts Coalition. So it's called PROMAC. And she did this presentation there. I'll send it to you. Yeah. But she had like all the studies that were linked into there. And I guess as soon as she saw that study come out, she was teaching martial arts part-time. And she was working with kids like as a resource. It's like for kids who are like slower on the development cycle in elementary school, working with them 20 minutes, once to 2 times a week, right? She's like, man, if I want to have an impact, I'm going to do this full-time where I get the kids for 2 or 3 hours at a time. So she like quit her job doing that, went full-time into martial arts because she's like, I'm going to have way more impact on that. Yeah. But with like the brain damage with trauma, I've seen a lot of commissions. I know Arizona, the Arizona Department of Gaming and Boxing Commission, they're doing some new neurological tests. Have you seen that? They use like an app or something.
So I'm on with the commission. I haven't seen that, but I'll be looking out for it. So, I do know that when fighters have come to Arizona, they've commented that, when they come here, we have a pretty thorough medical eval. They're quite impressed with how, it's run here. Yeah. Both on the commission side and Muay Thai side, USMTA, it's I think we run a pretty good show, a pretty good operation on both of them.
Yeah, and the reason I heard about it was when they had the Samurai Soul show, and Nick and Bob was telling me about like they're having them do some app or something like that. And I think it's a newer protocol as of like last year.
Yeah, so I mean, the approaches to concussion that they're looking at is because people are variable and the brain is variable. You can't really hold someone to a certain standard. You got to kind of look at getting baselines.
Like I was asking about like the kids, like is anybody tracking that, right?
Yeah, I mean, I would suggest that if I kind of do this with my own, my son's in contact sport, my daughter's not, but with my own son, I would do things like get a baseline and see if he's varying from that baseline. Look at what's going on in the academics and those type of performances as well. So you can see variation rather than just kind of writing off a whole sport for the potential of these changes.
Yeah, and that's like you're talking about baseline, right? Yes. So like the baseline for anybody that doesn't know, in combat sports, I never had a brain scan until it was time to go pro, right? It's like, hey, man, I had like 19, 20 fights. How many rounds of sparring? How many years of training is that? Like, so you're quote unquote normal on a MRI of your brain might actually not be normal for you, but the neurologist looking at it doesn't know that, right? So
when you look at imaging, when you look at an MRI, it's actually very poor for determining function.
No shit.
Yeah. So if someone has a bleed, they're bleeding like
you could see that, yeah.
But for looking at function, it's not there. And that's kind of the emphasis of the way we run our practice is we kind of say, okay, we got to look at brain function. And so we look at kind of four main areas. So the first is looking at your autonomic nervous system. So that's your sympathetics and parasympathetics. Okay. Like you might have heard this in things like heart rate variability or stuff like that, but there's a lot more refined and specific things that we can look at to see how your sympathetics work. So one of the common things that happens when you have a head injury is that the brain's ability to suppress your sympathetic nervous system is depleted and your sympathetic nervous system starts cranking up. So what that means, it can happen in some common ways. One of the ways is that your sympathetic nervous system is too reactive. So you start training, and we do this test called exertional tolerance testing. So we put you under a stress and see how your sympathetic nervous system reacts. And very often what happens, it'll be it's almost like you hit that red line, and then your sympathetic nervous system kicks in disproportionately. Now, that could be something like getting dizzy. It could be your heart tacking out. And usually it could be inefficiency while you're training, or it could be like a surge of negativity that is so subtle in your emotions and your cognition that you're not quite aware of it. Another way that it can happen is, as I said, just regulation of heart rate, have a heart problems, falling asleep, or just tacking out, like palpitations in the chest. So that's autonomics. The other one is cognition. So your ability to reason, your memory, your short-term memory. So we have specific tests that we look at that. Then there's also your metabolism, how efficiently you're metabolizing things and how your metabolism is your brain. Obviously, it's very important how your brain is using glucose and oxygen. If it's underusing or overusing, that can have problems. That's your brain's fuel supply. And then the last part is this kind of is connectivity. So how different areas of your brain connect. So we test that by looking at specific eye movements on a kind of an elaborate diagnostic system called VNG. It's one of them. And we look at how each of these eye movements is controlled by different parts of your brain, so we can see how these different parts of the brain are relating to one another. Now, the reason I'm saying this is that all of these areas relate to brain function, and they're not looked at in conventional psychiatry. And then neurology doesn't step into the behavioral parts. So in those two fields, they kind of separated. So we try to bring those together.
You kind of act as a bridge between both.
Right. Yeah. So those are a way to say these are the various ways that your brain can be affected in these. We use those systems to take a dip in and kind of see what's that kind of profile of this person's brain and areas that we can kind of bring up through therapy.
Damn. Yeah. I always thought it was interesting. I'm like, how thorough is the MRI? Because I don't know much about it. Like I know that it's a requirement. I know that like when it comes into brain bleeds and stuff like that, and they talk about like black spots in the brain and stuff like this. But I didn't know that.
Well, I think what would be more reliable for somebody that's going to get an MRI, which isn't going to show much, is number one, how you're sleeping, the most important. How long is it taking you to fall asleep? And is there any effort that you're putting into falling asleep? So if you're trying at all, if you're like, man, I'm trying to fall asleep, and that thought is occurring to you, or you're using meditation or you're using mindfulness and in these efforts to try, sleep shouldn't be trying. So if you're trying to fall asleep and that's new for you, that's kind of an indication that things may be off. how long it takes you to fall asleep, and how long you're sleeping, and then also how many times you're waking up. So that's a measure for. Often fighters are, when they're training, they're very acutely sensitive to these changes, so they can detect these changes a lot more than an MRI or even a specialist that you see.
Yeah, 100%. You're saying this, like I've had times where I was in training before, and I had a very hard time sleeping. I had like sleeping issues, I think, for probably about 8 months, where I would every day at like 2:30 in the morning, I'd wake up wide awake. I had like a whole like sleep study and everything done like that too.
Yeah. One of the tricks that can happen in training is you can vary your training on the weekends or during the week. Some people are doing that if they've got jobs or that kind of stuff. So their time of wakening and the time of falling asleep shifts according to the weekend. And what they're actually inducing is kind of like their own personal jet lag. Because what you're doing is you're shifting your sleeping and waking time to accommodate a different schedule. That's often how you can, one of the simple ways and common ways that sleep can be interrupted. But another is things like heart palpitations. Are you feeling kind of, more gas disproportionately? Are you hitting a certain point of activity at a certain point in your training, or at a certain heart rate where it becomes difficult to concentrate, for example? That could be that you're hitting a sort of a ceiling of exertional intolerance, and that level of exertional tolerance can be lowered with a head injury. So what happens is it's not that you're less fit, it's not that your heart muscle is not there, it's not that your muscular metabolism has changed in any way, but it's just that your nervous system's ability to kind of ramp up with you and to kind of balance your autonomic nervous system is impaired because of the head injuries. That's another one. Are you hitting that kind of certain point? That's going to be a clue that maybe, there's some nervous system involvement.
Oh shit. So it's like, this is case in point to kind of bridge this together for people in layman's terms. Your favorite fighter that you might see out there that looks like they're gassed and they're in great shape, it might be something to do with head injury.
With the nervous system.
Yeah, or nervous system overall. Yeah. So what are some things that like, I guess for you that you're doing, I know you have a lot of research, you're talking about this stuff for migraines and everything. For anybody that's out there, what are some steps that they could do to ensure, because you're talking about sleep, right? I know that's a big one. I did a whole thing, and I've noticed this in our culture. I call it sleep machismo. People are like, I only slept 4 hours, you pussy. And it's like, hey man, like it's not about like how little you can sleep. Like I always had the best performance when I would get like anywhere from 8 to like 9.5 hours of sleep. So with the lack of sleep, does anything like that predispose your nervous system to taking more like damage when you're ramping up like that or anything?
So quite simply, and people may have heard this before, if you're not sleeping sufficiently, your level of your threshold for damage is definitely lowered. Your probability of having a concussion or brain injury goes down, not only because you're uncoordinated and making yourself dangerous from an inability to defend yourself, not from that growth scale, but on a simple substrate level, you're not sleeping, your threshold for injury goes way down. Okay, so definitely sleep. Now, what are some of your guidelines on sleep? One is, do you feel well rested? Okay, so it's not really a number. They say, look, you should strive for maybe 7 hours, but do you feel well rested?
Yeah.
Do you feel, and it's kind of like not, and by the way, if you're depending on any of these heart sleep monitors or whatever, please don't. Those things are the equivalent to kind of a hamster on a wheel. Like, I mean, it's like, hey, the wheel's not turning, so therefore you must be asleep. It's like they're really not very accurate. There are other measures that you can do, like you get a kind of a sleep diary and look at when you're waking up and when you're going to sleep. But do you feel well rested despite the numeric scale? And if you don't, quite frankly, you need more. If there's any sense that you feel, man, I wish I could need more sleep, you probably do. And you can look at opportunities there to improve that. If you're waking up frequently, and as I said, another very simple subjective metric is, are you trying to fall asleep? If there's a thought in your mind that you're trying, you've got some sleep issues. There's an opportunity to improve that.
Yeah. And when it comes into like sleep health and everything like that too, so those things, like as soon as I figured out what my problems were, I was like, I'm investing in a nice mattress. Like I'm just like, I took all the stuff I took for granted. I'm like, no, I'm going out on this, because it was like as soon as I got it back, I was like, I'm never letting this go. Because like, some people, they struggle from sleep apnea, right? So like having a sleep apnea, you're never getting that deep restful sleep. So you're always gonna feel tired. I know it predisposes you like heart disease and all this other stuff too. So not much less, we're talking about like your nervous system on top of it also. So when it comes into like their personality changes and stuff too. So we talk about concussions. A lot of people think like this big hard blow to the head. But concussion.
A blow to the body can be concussion.
Yeah.
It doesn't need to be a headshot. I mean, you've seen this, right?
Yeah, yeah.
So I mean, it can be a blow to the body. It could be cumulative blows to the body. It could be a particularly hard training session where you've got small accumulated damage at the time that you have the flu, or at the time that you don't have good sleep. The point is that there's a resultant damage to the nervous system. You've impaired the nervous system's function, and that expresses in a way, and it typically is like water. Like water goes to cracks. The damage is typically going to go where your innate intrinsic weaknesses are, and everybody's nervous system has a different profile. So it might be related to kind of a predisposition that you've had way back in your youth to a particular injury, and it kind of manifests that way through any combination of those things. So no, you don't need a massive head injury, a single event where you're knocked out to have the head injury. The most common, you've seen this as well. What's the most common knockout mechanism? Yeah, the rotation.
So yeah, chin snapping. Yeah,
right. When you see that rotation, that's because that predisposes you what's called diffuse axonal injury. So basically, you think of your spinal cord and your brain being these long wires that go from your brain up and down, right? Mm-hmm. So it's kind of like ringing the towel. When that head whips like that, you kind of twist those wires and give them a jolt, and that's kind of the worst kind of form of concussion, where it leads to these kind of damage to these wires essentially along the way from that quick whip. But it doesn't need to be that, but that's probably the most reliable way to
tell. Yeah.
Is that rotational whip.
So, cause I like when I was going through and I was talking to some people about like head injuries, they were saying even like, they were measuring head injuries from car accidents. Mm-hmm. They're saying like even like a 5 mile per hour fender bender can cause a brain injury. That's right. Yeah. Right. And that's where I was like, damn, it makes me wonder from the years of combat sports training, even if you're not getting hit in the head, but then you think about other sports too, gymnastics, horseback riding. Horseback riding is gnarly when it comes to that stuff because they get jolted around a lot, falling, all that stuff too. So for people that might be listening out there, and like you're saying, you didn't dissuade them from doing this. Life has risks, right? Absolutely. You get in your car every day and you go drive, right? So let's say somebody does have some of these things. What are some of the things that you do to help, I guess, alleviate some of that?
Well, first of all, I'm not the only person in the world that can help with that.
Yeah.
So
there's a lot, right? There's a lot of research that's on it. Yeah. So there's a lot of different methods.
If you think that you got a kind of a nervous system deficit, if it makes sense, hey, you had these personality changes, some things that you may have not associated with it, you go get your nervous system assessed. So there's a lot of rehab guys out there that do kind of brain rehab. I look specifically at rehab because if you're going into conventional neurology, generally speaking, not all neurologists are trained in concussion. In fact, very, very few are very current on concussion and these kind of mild, subtle head injuries. Some are, but then neurologists are not doing the rehabilitation. So I would probably go to somebody that's good with neuro rehab. So they're looking at opportunities to fix it because the beautiful thing is, here's the good news, is despite the fact that you may have had a concussion, you have these cumulative damages, just like your body, the brain heals itself. All you got to do is you got to find out exactly where that deficit is and then just focus, just like a weak muscle group or a weak technique. You just got to go into that technique and drive it. And the good news is the brain responds extremely quickly. Generally speaking, there's things that the brain wants. The brain wants oxygen, it wants blood supply, okay, and it wants activation. So, if you wind down in any of those three things, for sure, you're not going to, the brain will generally start expressing its weaknesses, put it that way.
Yeah. So like what like, let's say, what's the example of like a treatment that somebody might do? Is it like a hormonal therapy? Is it like hypnotherapy? What is it?
All of the above. So when somebody comes in to see me, for example, but again, I'm not the only person in the world that can help. But if they do come in to see me, my emphasis is in the overlap of the nervous system and call it psychiatry, your behavioral, emotional, mental control. I really enjoy that overlap, and that's how my practice is. So basically someone will come in and they'll get a neurologic exam. So the first is, we said, those autonomics. So we put them on a machine called a tilt table, which looks at their autonomic nervous system, how it responds in gravity. So for example, when you're lying down, your heart rate should drop. And when you go up, your heart rate should speed up so that your brain maintains good oxygenation. Yeah. So it's a very simplified way, but we put them on a machine like that and we're looking at an EKG to see how the nervous system responds. We put them on exertional tolerance, put them on a treadmill, get the heart rate up and see, as your exertion goes up, how your nervous system is responding through the full range of exertion. Are there gaps? So it's kind of like you'll see that when people have had a head injury or they have something called dysautonomia, reliably, when the heart rate gets to a certain level, it's like you see on the movies with it, the lie detector or something. So it's, starts going. It's essentially like that. The sympathetic nervous system starts going haywire. So what we'll do then is actually, the cool thing about this is, even though there is that threshold, reliably, if the athlete exercises below that threshold just for a little bit, keeps their activity level below that threshold, watching their heart rate, that threshold goes up super quick. So instead of trying to blast through it and tough through it, just by staying just for a little while, like we're talking days and just maybe a week or two, almost every couple of days, if you stay below that, you can push that up. So just being aware of where that is, looking at the autonomics. We then look at their cognitive function. So looking at this test that we do on a computer that looks at short-term memory and different ways what your cognitive system is doing. We look at the connection, and then basically we get a profile that tells us where the weaknesses are. And then what we'll do is we'll do any modalities like brain rehab, virtual reality, ketamine therapy.
Well, ketamine therapy. Yeah. So I've heard a little bit about this. Yeah. So how does ketamine therapy play into brain health, like with this?
Yeah. So unfortunately, everybody's trying to jump into this because psychedelics are cool.
Yeah. Well, what's funny is as soon as we talked about it, all of a sudden I started getting targeted ads. They're listening. They're listening to Dave George. Yeah, but no, I'm serious. I started getting targeted ads for ketamine therapy.
It's probably as I go near you.
Yeah, they're like
Google brushes off.
They're like this person's in his contacts. We gotta start targeting them, right?
Sorry about that.
Yeah.
But anyway, so ketamine has become a little mystical. It gets a little silly. A lot of people are trying to jump into it because it is a psychedelic, and of course that's intriguing because all of this has been illegal, and people have known innately. There are people back in the 60s and whatever, and they're like, these experiences are amazing. There must be something to it, yet law is telling us not to touch it. So of course, now that law is easing up on this and the regulation is becoming a little bit more amenable to it, it's people, of course, are interested.
Yeah.
But here's the message is that it's a drug like any other drug.
Yeah.
Okay. It's not magic. It hasn't come down from the heavens. It's just a drug like any other drug. But what it does do is that it is a global brain exciter. It works on your glutamate system, or it's called your NMDA and AMPA receptors. So what it does by modulating those are all over the brain. So what it does is it shuts down one and causes the glutamate to flow into another set of receptors called AMPA. And those are located all over your brain, particularly for its effects in your limbic system and what's called your default mode network. So what it does is it causes the surge of neurotransmitter in your brain. And in that moment that the neurotransmitters are surging, there's an opportunity to guide that, just like you're watering a garden, to guide that to kind of where it needs to go. So maybe we need to edit an old emotional response or deal with an old trauma, or we just need to focus in a particular area, like, for example, your concentration or your short-term memory or something. So that's the way we use it, is we use it in a way that's saying, okay, for the 45 minutes to maybe an hour and a half that the drug is active, what can we do with it? So we just swamp the brain and the nervous system with all kinds of things that again, are prescribed based on the exam that you get.
Yeah.
So that's how we use ketamine. Now, of course, there's different ways. You can take it in a very low dose. It's sublingual, which is kind of like a glass of wine effect. We use like, I feel enhanced in some way, but we're having a conversation just like you and I are having.
Yeah.
So we use it in what's called ketamine-assisted psychotherapy. But then there's also the intravenous dose, which will, of course, bring on the psychedelic type associative experiences. But they're not all like that. It's dosed and it's according to person. Now, someone that comes in with a head injury, I don't want to put them on an IV.
No.
Because what happens is, you think about this, is if I got a car and the wheel's a little bit loose and, if I step on the gas, it gets to 55, it starts rattling. The last thing I want to do is go take it up to 100.
Yeah.
Which is what giving you an IV does in the same, see ya.
Good luck, right? Yeah.
It's going to cause your brain to crash. It's going to probably, not reliable, it depends on the person, potentially cause setbacks. So we want to go in little bits and make it a little bit more specific.
Yeah. So how long has that been experimented with? And I obviously, we're talking, you're just like referencing back to the 60s, but like from a clinical standpoint, and when did you start getting involved with that?
Well, I didn't get back in the 60s because I wasn't born.
Yeah. You're not that old, man. Yeah.
Not that old.
Yeah.
No, so just recently, like within the past, my interest in it has been within the past 10, but only the regulation has only been accessible, call it the last 5 years.
Wow.
So everybody's jumped in, but the knowledge of how it works and what it works has been examined since the 50s, because it's been used as an anesthetic since the 50s.
Mm.
So we know more or less what it does to the brain. So when regulation allowed it, that it was available, people that are kind of from a neuroscience-y type background have been like, sweet, because, so think about it this way. I'll give you this example. When you're meditating, for example, or you go in a mindfulness activity and you bring your attention within the body and you're kind of listening to the body and you're listening to your thoughts and you remove it from the world around you, there's two competing networks in your brain. One is called the central executive. So if you and I are having this conversation right now, I'm looking at you, you're looking at me, we're activating the central executive. But when we withdraw and go in, we start activating a different part of the brain called the default mode network. And within this default mode network, there's the autobiographical storage of who you are, your memories, your personality, your emotions, and how that all integrates with your version of reality, as well as how it integrates with your internal sense of your body. That, by the way, happens with people with head injury. They start getting a sense like, dude, I don't even know who I am. I don't feel like I own my body. My body feels weird. I don't feel connected to my life. It's from damage to the default mode network.
Yeah.
So when you go mindfulness, or even prayer, you're activating that default mode network. You're starting to give it reps. You're starting to exercise it. Now, mindfulness and meditation exist on one end of the continuum where it's kind of a good exercise. Hypnosis is even deeper of an activation for the default mode. It's even more of an activation. Psychedelics are exponentially more than that. So it's all on a continuum. So if you think about, if you've derived a benefit from mindfulness and meditation, if you've derived a benefit from hypnosis, it's just ramped up more with psychedelics. And that's the way that we apply it with ketamine. It's just on that continuum. Where do we want to be? Is we want a big ramp? Do we want a little ramp? Do we want to integrate it with these things? That's the way we use it.
That makes sense. So it's, a therapeutic use of the drug, obviously, right, to help facilitate in whatever treatment the person needs, whether they need a lot. I like the reference of the wheel. You don't want to have the wheel come flying off when you're hitting 100. You want to make sure it's solid. So
the difference of that wheel analogy is not to have people walk around that think they're broken.
Yeah,
is the wheel analogy is the brain's a little bit different. Okay, so if I have a broken car with that wheel and I drive it to 55, I'm going to park it. It's still going to be broken when I come back.
Yeah.
The way the brain works is if I drive it up to 55 and kind of stay in the lane, when I park it, when I come back, provided there's enough rest, I'm going to be able to push it to 65. I'll be able to push to 75 because through neuroplasticity, the brain grows.
Yeah.
So the brain
just like a muscle.
That's right.
Yeah. Just like a muscle you were talking about. It's like working out, like you're putting the focus on it. For these kinds of therapies, like what have you seen be the timeline for people when they start seeing improvements from it?
The beauty is when there's the right prescription, it's instantaneous. So I have a range of people that going to see, like, for example, my next appointment this afternoon is a swimmer who is a cumulative head injury from swimming. That
from swimming, from diving.
Swimming, yeah. So now we don't know exactly why it is. Is it that there was a viral illness? Was there something that happened at the time that lowered the threshold? But no contact sports, but concussion symptoms and dysautonomia.
Shit. So
that's we deal with that. But then also I might see patients that are suicidal. I've seen just a few of those, unfortunately, in the past couple of weeks. And the reason I bring those two cases up is in each of those cases, if I don't see an immediate benefit, that doesn't mean everything's fixed.
Yeah.
But if I don't see an immediate change, almost immediately, like at least I feel better, and then the next time much better and much better, then I know that I've got it wrong. The diagnosis is wrong. I'm pointing to the wrong area.
You're not directing that energy towards the right part of the brain that you need to focus on.
Exactly right. Exactly right. So yeah, if you, the way the brain works is if there's a imbalance in the brain and you do something to increase that imbalance, people will notice it right away. They'll feel horrible.
Yeah. Well, I talked to you a little bit. It was brain spotting. So I did the brain spotting therapy, and that shit changed my life.
It's intriguing.
But one of the things I don't know, did you? I can't recall, but did you read into it more? If it's something that you know about? So, like, I had a straight open eye visual hallucination with my therapist. I was looking at him like, your face is melting off. He's like, yeah, that's normal. I'm like, okay, but it's just being transparent for anybody out there that's kind of going through this stuff. That was without any medication, no therapeutic, nothing like that. This is just us breathing and talking. Because with anybody that doesn't know brain spotting, it's like you work on it, like the different planes. They have you look, go through your therapy session, then they have you look at the spot where it brings up that emotion. You work through it and you talk through it. And that was probably like one of the most difficult things that I did. It reminded me of a very intense training session, and I passed the hell out afterwards. Every single time I would fall asleep for 45 minutes.
So two things on that. No, fantastic brain
Yeah.
spotting. So the fields of psychiatry
Mm-hmm.
and neurology are kind of moving closer together. So you're starting to see in psychiatry and psychotherapy, you're starting to see things like EMDR, eye movements in conjunction with therapy, brain spotting, very focused, specific fixation along with therapy. So you're starting to see these two worlds connect. The eye movements and fixation have been studied in neuroscience for a very long time. We know when an eye looks here, what that's doing, which part of the brain, that sort of thing. You're seeing those worlds starting to merge, first of all. Second of all, with respect to the underlying mechanism of that brain spotting, makes a lot of sense. So there's two mechanisms, or actually three, that come to mind. First of all, one of the common things that we see in head injury and in brain injury is when people are attending to their vision, they start becoming intolerant of peripheral stimuli. And they interpret that as anxiety. And it has to do with something called brain mapping, an area of the brain called the colliculus, that attends to your periphery. So that's actually one of the things we look for is how do people attend to their peripheral vision? Now, you can imagine as a fighter, imagine this. Imagine if you start becoming intolerant to stimuli in your peripheral vision in a particular field.
That's not good.
Where it starts jacking up your anxiety. So not only is that not safe, but really that's not a great place to be. So that's one thing. It has to do with that mapping where you're saying looking in certain areas. And the next is where that makes a lot of sense to me is your ability to fixate on something requires very, very strong activation of what's called your frontal eye fields in the very front part of your brain called your frontal lobe. So if I'm telling you to stare at a dot and I'm fixating on that dot, which is obviously a requirement in all sports, and I'm focusing on that, I'm activating your frontal lobes very, very heavily. Now, I'm activating that part of that, what's called that central executive that we spoke about. Now, combine that with memories and activating that default mode. Now I'm starting to rebuild those connections between the default mode and that central executive. So you can see where I can totally understand where a therapy like that would be very useful, because if I can give you this as a summary is, as you look at the literature on brain trauma, physical trauma, emotional trauma, and they look at these what are called functional MRI studies, the hallmark signature injury that you see is a disconnection of the new parts of the brain from the old parts of the brain. So that what you described to me in the brain spotting would be very reasonable way to very heavily exercise that front part of the brain where I'm staring at something, but then recall memories which come from the old part of the brain and start building that connection, because you are exercising those two things at the same time. And what the brain does go, oh, I should strengthen the connection between these two things, going to reestablish it. So it makes a lot of sense.
Yeah, like you were saying.
You did pretty well at brain spotting, right?
Yeah, like we were talking about anxiety. It's all good. We were talking about anxiety, people attribute that to like an anxious feeling or something and not knowing how to deal with it. Right. And they see it a lot because they call it ACEs, adverse childhood experiences or events. So I think I have like 6 of them. And they say if you have 3 or more, it's bad. I was like, when he told me this, I'm like, oh, I have 6. Is that good? He's like, got something to tell you. For anybody that doesn't know, it's supposed to be like 3 or more. You're supposed you can have health effects that happen, heart problems, extenuating health issues. It has to do with stress and stuff too.
The adverse childhood experiences scale, which is the ACEs, looks at your past trauma. And they've looked at a very high correlation between childhood trauma and subsequent adult health problems, as you say, and a predisposition to cardiovascular disease and general health problems in general.
Yeah. And it makes me wonder how many good fighters out there score high on that scale too.
I bet most.
I bet you it is, and they probably don't even know. And that's what's crazy. And that's where stuff like what you do, like when we're talking, I think is so important for people because, hey, the ring is great. There's a beautiful thing about an expression through combat sports in the like science of fighting, but then everybody has a life afterwards. And some fighters, they have a great life afterwards. Some of them, not so much. You see suicide, you see, violent events that happen in their life afterwards, or like domestic violence, whatever it is, mental health issues, neurological issues,
That's right.
There's a fighter right now in California named Nam Fan, and it's a video, it's viral. It showed him early in his career and now where he's like stumbling. It's like the boxer is pugilistica, I think is how's that pronounced? Basically where you're mumbling a lot. You're all there, like you're coherent, but you can't verbalize as clearly as you normally would be able to.
Yeah.
So
you want to intervene long before it gets to that level.
Oh yeah. So I know that a lot of the stuff that you're doing has to do with that, but I guess going into it, like, what got you involved in this? What made you want to do this?
Well, I think it was just a progression. As I said, I lectured on neuro rehab, clinical neuroscience. I already found the brain fascinating.
Yeah.
I worked when I was in school early on. I worked in the research department, and I just happened to have a really, really great research director that worked on a condition called trigeminal neuralgia, which is a very, very painful facial condition. And he'd have people coming in from all over the world, like really pretty in bad shape. And I was just really intrigued. And then I started getting into the nervous system, started getting into the brain. And then we developed a program called Functional Neuro-Orthopedic Rehabilitation, where we integrated neurology with orthopedics to kind of speed up rehab from things like back pain and knee pain and those sorts of things. But in that process, we were getting a lot of people with what's called polytrauma. So as you say, a car accident with head injury plus spine plus neck plus whatever, or an athlete that has shoulder plus back plus head plus. So they would kind of fall through the cracks. And the biggest area that fell through the cracks to me was the emotional, mental part. Because when you look at the brain, I was like, well, you know what? Like, who's here for these guys? Nobody. And so,
that was like fucked up to hear that. Like, it's bad. Yeah,
exactly. And look, I mean, if you can tolerate pain, you kind of keep it in proportion. You can kind of overcome it. Particularly these fighters, you know, man, it's a different mentality.
Well, yeah, because they have that poker face to be able to just like, hey, no, it's like, hey, on a scale of 1 to 10, what's your daily pain? Like, oh, like a 7. It's like, oh, that's not normal. It's like, it's not. You know, for them that's their normal, right? But at some point, that needs to be able to get turned down to a 2, man, like, or a 3.
All right. So there's pain and suffering. Right? So the pain, bodily pain, but think about emotional part, the emotional, cognitive, mental part, where they can't concentrate, and then there's this self-defeating cycle, and anxiety and depression. Relationships are a problem. Holding a job is a problem. You know, even it gets to the point. You think about this: your ability to first of all recognize where you are in present time, and then to project that into the future, where you have the beginnings of imagination of, hey, what do I do next? So there's the spark of imagination of what I do next, and then the ability to project yourself into, oh, I can see that happening, and then to sequence these steps from where you are right now to what happens next in your life, from the simplest thing, whether it's a job or a career or a move or whatever it is. All of that requires your brain, good brain function. So some of the hallmarks when people have these head injuries, first of all, they say, I don't really feel like myself. And they get to the point where, dude, what's your plans for the future? I can't even imagine myself into next week. You know, they have that problem. It's all. So yes, pain is one thing, but imagine all these emotional, mental, cognitive problems really debilitating. So I was passionately drawn to it, not only because it involved brain, but because of the potential of what it could do for people, really help people. So of course,
100%.
Everybody likes to be told that they made a difference in somebody's life or were able to help somebody. I'm kind of addicted to that. So maybe my own shortcomings and inferiority, but I thought, you know, there's a need here. And where my career has always gone is to unmet needs. So migraine is a huge unmet need. This is a big unmet need. So I find because I've had that experience throughout life, I've been like, okay, I know that if I commit to this, there'll be a period of difficulty and kind of confusion and self-doubt, that whole creation process. But in the end, I know it'll be rewarding. So that's kind of.
So, you know, kind of obviously there's crossover in combat sports based on our conversation. Anybody's listening and stuff too. For fighters that are out there, what do you think is probably like the most important thing for them? Obviously, like being self-aware is important. But if somebody notices these kind of symptoms, how could they find somebody? Who do they reach out to? Right? Like, what do you look for? Because like even me, I wouldn't really know unless someone was like, hey, you need to go you have to talk to my friend over here. That's how I found the person with the brain spotting too. Yeah.
So what I would suggest is a few things. Okay. So if I can, these are
absolutely
based upon kind of where I've seen it. Some of it I get really, it's a little bit cringy. So the first one is you spoke about childhood trauma.
Yeah.
Certainly childhood trauma. There's some good evidence that it predisposes you to issues later on. And there should be this consideration. But if the depression and anxiety and everything's coming up and you're an athlete, not all the answers are in your past and in childhood trauma. Okay?
Yeah.
What starts to happen is when the nervous system starts functioning low, or you're depriving yourself of sleep, or you haven't got those factors right, what's going to happen is your limbic system is going to rise up and you're going to start having anxiety and negativity and all that kind of stuff. It doesn't mean that you need to revise your entire past.
No.
Okay. Okay.
Yeah.
So I don't mean to be.
You're not marginalizing at all. Yeah.
But I don't want people to think that they're broken and it's all
that. No.
Stuff. So that's one thing. So
for all the high performers out there. Yeah.
So if you are going to get therapy, it would help to get therapy maybe with somebody that is an athlete that understands that, or has some background in neuro rehab, or is connected to that. I would also do, if you are getting therapy, look at that being as part of a process of a wheel of momentum that you've started, and just taking better care of yourself in general. Because if you take care of your body and your metabolism, along with that, generally there's a greater chance that you're going to change the brain. Now, sitting and talking to somebody is great, and I do recommend it, but sitting on a couch to change your brain and doing that can be helpful, particularly in the right context, but moving your body and stimulating the brain is better. So who would you look to? There's a field called functional neurology that you can look at. You can find a functional neurologist. If you are in the sport and you start to say, my personality is changing, I don't feel good or whatever, go get concussion tested. Go see a concussion person. Go get the baseline. Not the baseline. At this point, if you are injured, it's already happened. So baseline is too late, but get an assessment of your nervous system. That doesn't mean an MRI. That means
as we found,
right. Just a number of tests to see how your nervous system is functioning. That would be that. But the most important is the basic, and that seems maybe a little bit obvious for people, but looking at your sleep is always the first place that I start. Because some people come in and if they're sleeping, I'm like, I don't want to waste your time. Let's get that fixed first, and we'll look at the rest afterwards.
Yeah, the sleep thing, like I said, for somebody who's like, now, like, I protect my sleep. Yeah. It's like phone goes away, like all these little things that I have to, because I'm like, I know what it's like when if it goes away. Oh man, it's like torture. Literally, it's like it is. Yeah, it is a form of torture, and some people don't realize how sleep deprived they are. There's like, just like the athlete who you're like, where's your pain level at? They're like, oh, it's like 7 every day. It's like, how many hours you sleep? Oh, like 2 hours, 3 hours a night. It's like, that's not normal, man. Like, but looking at sleep patterns, I know that there's been like some research done on different sleep schedules. They had one that was called like the Uberman. It was like you'd sleep like 2 hours every 6 hours. It was something crazy like this. And there was something like, it was like Thomas Jefferson was one of those people that did like a sleep schedule like this. But that goes into people who are like, they're outliers, I guess, in this thing. And maybe that's what led to a little bit of their insanity of creative genius also. And, you're talking about, hey, not everybody has a troubled past. So it comes into like, having to go back to these first childhood experiences, whatever it is. But high performers are generally going to be under a certain level of stress too, right? Sure. So it just, like you're saying, athletes, it's part of pushing and putting fire under your ass to be able to perform, whatever it is, whether it be in your field, whether it be in sports, whether it be in officiating, right? That's talk about, it's like, hey, high stress sport, so you kind of going into that too. I think that in officiating, right? So like you're saying, when you start counting people or when you're looking at somebody, like, do you ever just think like, man, this person's really good at holding it together? Like I've had that before. I'm like, how's this person still standing up and looking like they're fine? From the kind of blows they've taken. Does any of your stuff in the back of your mind from your training make you like, are you ever more cautious with it, or are you ever like concerned with it afterwards, like where like talking with a supervisor afterwards and stuff too?
So I think so. One of the great things about USMTA, shout out Kamal, is he does regular trainings, and also basically the Arizona Commission that we like to go through.
Yeah, they do the Zoom training too, constantly.
You want to do that. So we're always getting updated on that. So, but having said that, do I go through a particular system? So me personally, there's an overlap between what is general and standard in the field and just good refereeing.
Yeah.
And that is, look, there's a system. Is the person able to defend themselves? If they're not able to defend themselves, then that's it. You know what I mean? Also, we're also trying to make a decision where we're not trying to influence the fight. So we're trying to say, look, there's kind of, it gets a level of cumulative damage that you see building up. It gets to a point of no return where you start looking for where, and then as you probably do the same thing, we start kind of positioning ourselves to kind of emphasize looking at one fighter and seeing, okay, how much is we watching those blows coming? Is it getting to that point of no return? Mm-hmm. Having said that, so there's that. And I think that's any good official would be doing that.
Oh, absolutely.
We're looking at that cumulative damage. And then if we give an account, saying, can this person defend themselves? Where that overlaps with my own personal kind of flavor way I'm looking at it, I'm looking at their nervous system. And the way I look at it is, Number one, looking at their visual system. So when I'm doing a count, I'm looking at their eyes. If their eyes are moving and they can't focus on
they can't see your hand.
They're not focusing on a shot. So if your eyes are not focused, and we do that in pre-fight, where we're like, okay, here's the procedure we're going to do, here's the count that we're going to give you, and here's exactly what I'm doing, so that they know and they have a shot in here. This is the framework that you're being assessed. It's going to be 3 steps. One is looking at your eyes. The other is your postural control. So there's your vestibular system, your system of balance. If someone gets struck on the side of the head, your actual balance system lives right here behind the ear and the mastoid. So you've seen those shots of the guys
and they like
the ear and they walk.
The legs kind of go about.
They're literally getting jolted onto their balance system. And how that'll manifest, that balance system, vestibular system, feeds into your eyes and gives your eyes the ability to focus, but also your downward, your postural control, because your vestibular spinal system. So if I'm starting to see eye deficits and starting to see a control in posture, they've literally lost the ability to control their posture. That person's probably going to be out of there. I'm not going to let that person go back. The other is just simply following instructions. If you can't follow my instructions, how are you going to coordinate your thoughts and
defend yourself and fight? Right?
Right.
Some people are like, "Oh, I trained so much, it's just going to come out." It's like, okay, that's a great thought, but it's not going that way right now. That's why I'm sitting here counting.
Yeah. Well, actually, that's another thing I love about about Arizona over here is officiating here is that generally speaking, these are very mature coaches in the corner. Very seldom do we get somebody out of there and have a coach complain, from Arizona. They usually have their fighters' well-being and they're watching and they've seen the same thing. I think it's a very mature fight community.
Yeah, well, and it's like they kind of know what to expect from us, right? Like from the people that they see working in there all the time. And I've said it like time and time again, is the team that I worked with teams everywhere. Is like one of the best like officiating teams when it comes into like number of trainings per year, communication, all this stuff for the region. And with that too is like, I've been in other countries where I'm the guy and people are yelling at me saying making the wrong decision, but then they come back later and they're like, that guy couldn't see the floor. That was a good call. Like, cause I saw like when I was counting, because they're looking down and I have my hands down here and I noticed that they're not seeing.
Yeah.
Right. And their eyes are doing this. And I'm just like, you're having a hard time getting up by 8, man. We're done.
Not even and just like off in a different direction and stuff.
Yeah.
Yeah. I think a lot of people, we love it.
Yeah.
As officials, a lot of people, they see some, as I said, not really. I think this community realized we've all been around for a long time and it's mature and we kind of support each other, the coaches and the officials and everybody. We all want the best thing, but we really do love the sport and we want the best fight. Like, and we want to see that. We love seeing the young fighters come up and, through the ranks and just every part of it. We love it.
Yeah. Bob used this analogy for pro. He's like, we want you to get to the point where you're getting paid. Then when you're getting paid, we let you get as close to death as possible, right? And I was like, damn, that's a morbid way, but isn't that true, right? And like we're that person, your coach is that person, but they're not as close as the referee, right? They don't have those laws and the rules, statutes behind them that you have to enforce, but they have their own personal thing that they're trying to do too, and they want to protect their fighter and make sure they win, right? It's like, hey, winning, making sure that they're safe. For us, we're just making sure they're safe. Exactly. That's like the number one thing. So that you kind of like live and die on that cross sometimes, and that's just the way it goes. But I'd rather make a decision for the safety for somebody, and it be too cautious than be one that it's not, and like you're going to somebody's funeral.
Definitely. Well, we don't. Yeah. We don't get to, we talk to each other, but we don't get to talk to anyone else about it. But we all have our friends in the community. I have my good buddy, Chris Flores is a good buddy of mine.
Yeah. Boxing referee, Muay Thai, everything.
Everything. Yeah. He's probably arguably the best in Arizona, I would say, as an official. But, he and I will go on hikes and be talking about fights and
yeah, you're venting
the mistakes we made and like, bouncing ideas of, hey, did we do the right thing? Did we whatever? But
because people don't know is like, if anybody's listening on the podcast, this is probably the most I've talked about officiating, and that's with reason, because you can't really talk about. Like part of the code is like we're generalizing a lot of this stuff, and I'm sure we could allude to certain things at certain points. We'd be like, oh yeah, I remember that, but we can't talk specifically about it because part of like the code of ethics on it, is not. You talk with your team. You always work on getting better because we're human, right? First and foremost, we're not a computer as much as people like to think we are, right? Based upon the insults that come at us. I think Chris, someone I saw at one of the tournaments, someone's like, you piece of shit. He's like, oh, thank you. Yeah. I was like, oh man, I need to like, that was like one of those things. I'm like, I'm going to adapt that whenever I officiate. It's just like, hey, if you get those at youth, hey, that it's just, that comes with
it's
it.
Understandable. Like, I mean, you have those, we don't talk about, that's right. And that you might, appreciate that at risk. We don't go home and like talk to friends and whatever. It's kind of like you're supposed to let it all be there, and we keep it all in the community. And
it's work.
And sometimes you want to, I mean, you feel really bad. Like sometimes there's a call that comes up, but we don't like those calls to get contentious, and we want the best outcome for everybody. So, but when you have a corner that is yelling and stuff, you wish it to be more professional, but you definitely understand why.
Yeah. It's like, for me, like when I'm coaching, like I've been that guy. I've been that guy yelling at the referee and then calming myself down and then talking to the chairman afterwards and figuring out what happened. And is knowing about like the process of how everything works and everything like that too. And it comes into education, the sport, just like stuff with brain health. We have so much stuff that goes into that. It's like California, they have AB, I think it's AB 2007. So anybody that does with youth sports and contact sports and martial arts went under that umbrella. They're supposed to have like the CDC heads up concussion certification. So it's very funny because like we had the youth athletes, and I had one of our older coaches like, man, like this stuff's dumb. Like, of course we know what this is. Like, it's not that. It's just having the certificate to say we did this thing that abides by this law. But not everybody does know that stuff.
Well, yeah, I don't know. As an official, it's kind of like an art, man. It's like there's just different facets. So there's the ring mechanics and trying to be better. We're always trying to be better. Like all of us, you never feel like you're there. I personally have been doing it for 15 years, but I still feel it's a privilege and feel like I need to improve by light years still.
Yeah. I see you, at the gym showing up on sparring nights with your ref shoes, getting practice. And I've seen this before. For anybody that's out there that doesn't know this, like I can verify. I've seen almost every referee in Arizona. I'm actually not almost. I think all referees that work for USMTA that do pro stuff also. I've seen them at the gym on sparring night, practicing officiating and going through it, and we talk and stuff too. So like I've seen that.
Yeah, I mean, part of it is also practicing regulating your nervous system, just like a fighter.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, we get it. Sometimes there's a big fight and things are getting up there, and as the fight's getting up in energy level and activity, as a ref, you have to train yourself to go the opposite way.
Mm-hmm.
Trying to calm your nervous system down as things are ramping up, and that takes practice. So if you haven't been in the ring in a few weeks, you got to get into the gym. I see it as responsible. So a lot of times, I think I've seen you there too. If there's going to be a big event or something like that for Muay Thai, for example, Aspar Kamal, who's always open to it, saying, hey, can I get some rounds with your fighters just to get the nervous system and everything back into it the day before a fight, so that I can be, preconditioned before we get into the next day. So it's not just fresh. It's not
that because you work boxing also as well, right? Boxing. Yeah. So for me, I've never done boxing stuff. I've only done Muay Thai, and I know it's very different, right? It's like in boxing, I know that it's like if the referee's getting close to the fighters, something terribly wrong is going on, right? It's like a foul or like something's going on.
Yeah. Less experienced in boxing than Muay Thai, so it's counted against me a little bit. At times it's different mechanics. Muay Thai, you want to be there.
Yeah, you want to be right in their face and close. One step away because you can be saving a fighter from a unnecessary damage, whatever it is, from a follow up knee or a kick or an elbow. Whereas boxing, they're a little bit different because the target's not the whole body. There are only two weapons you got to worry about. Damn fast with those weapons, and they hit freaking hard with them. But you can watch it more from like a distance too.
It's also a different culture.
Yeah.
These are things that I love, man. Like I might be preaching to the choir here, but one of the things, you look at Muay Thai, the difference is it makes it different athletes. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
Like they say, those
body type way different. Yeah.
Completely different body type.
We were talking about this.
Right,
yeah.
So you think about it, those legs are like coming in like baseball bats. You know what I mean? So you got to develop the muscles, length, and proportion and function to swing these baseball bats, as well as the proportion to swing in these knees and these bucks. So it's a very different body to a boxer. It's also a different kind of fight. You know what I mean? So if people haven't looked at Muay Thai, I just really suggest you come and watch. It's like you've probably had friends that come to watch that haven't seen it before.
They're like, oh,
didn't realize it's completely different. It's a different atmosphere. I love it.
Yeah,
I mean, I like even from you might go to a boxing fight or something like that, and then come back to Muay Thai. Oh man,
I miss this. Yeah, but I think some of it comes. It's all what it reminded me of. I was talking to Bob about this. Is like with the circuit that's kind of developing in like the Southwest region. Is it's to say you see the same coaches more, right? Everybody's kind of got mutual respect for it. When it comes into like whether it be officiating, coaching, fighting, quartering, cut man, whatever it may be. It's created like this really cool industry. And it reminds me a lot of like, so I lived down in North Hollywood for a while. It reminds me a lot of the entertainment industry when it came into film and stuff. Everybody knew each other. Everybody knew what each other brought to the table. They all talk, oh, I know this person. Oh, you know this person. They would just be like kind of connecting the dots. And it's a lot like that with Muay Thai, which I like about it because it lets you know somebody's full of shit too. Right? If someone says like, oh, cool. Yeah, you did that. Oh, when was that? Oh, yeah, I was there. I didn't see you there. Right. But like before, people used to be able to get away with those kinds of things, being inauthentic. And now it's a very authentic thing. People are going to Thailand more now than ever. You're asking me like, dude, how do you get over to Thailand so much?
Well, you do get over there.
Yeah. It's like, for me, because that's, I only do like Muay Thai, with like having like the academies, the programs, officiating with like media stuff. Like,
you're heavily involved. It's awesome.
Yeah.
Like I said, it's the passion drives it all.
Yeah, 100%. Right. It's like if people look at it, it's like, I've been with partners and they try to talk me out of being involved with Muay Thai, and obviously that's why I'm not with those people anymore, And I had a girlfriend in the past. She's like, "You can't just do Muay Thai for a living. You can't just be involved." I'm like, "Yeah, okay, bye, see ya," And here we are, and just to see that come around, and a lot of people that are involved in this are like that, in varying degrees. Some people more than me. Right, some people way more than me. I'm just like, damn, man. All right.
It adds to the environment, man.
Yeah,
it adds. Like, I mean, I had a friend that I know through a friend that ended up coming to a fight just a few weeks ago, and came up to me as I had no idea it was like this. Like, but I think the passion of the coaches and the officials and everyone. It's not just what's going on in the ring, although that is the highlight and that should be the focus. But it's just, I think everything all together makes that environment that just emphasizes the different and creates that thing that I think will continue to attract people.
Yeah, and that's one of those things, like the vibe. I talked about this with Bob, with Vin. Everybody's like, Arizona, like Phoenix is like the Bangkok of the U.S. when it comes into fights, because there's so much activity here, and I think it's going to continue that way. And a lot of the people are starting to see it. A lot more people are starting to see it. So I think we're going to see more fighters. You're going to probably see more coaches come out from different states. We've already kind of been seeing that. But, for anybody that's interested in your business and what you do out here in Scottsdale, how can people get a hold of you or find you?
Well, thanks for that. They can just get my website, Neuregen, which is www.neuregen.com, and that's the website.
Awesome. I'll make sure to put that down in the show notes for anybody that's watching, or if you're listening, it'll be down in the show notes on the podcast.
Or you can find me the next Muay Thai fight.
Yeah, find you there, get a picture. Yeah. When you're not working though. Yeah, when you're not working. And Dave George, thanks for coming in today. All right, that's going to be it for today. Thank you so much for tuning in today to the Pu'u Muay Thai Podcast. If you enjoy the content, go leave a review over on Apple Podcasts and on Spotify. Give us a rating. It means the world to us. Also, if you want to be a guest on the Pu'u Muay Thai Podcast, or if you just want to shout out to your friend, go check us out at podcast.puumuaythai.com. You can submit to be able to be a guest on the podcast. You can submit what you want to talk about. Also, if you want to just give a shout out, there's a button for that too. Sawadee Kop.